Wanderers, Chapter 2, First Part. It was 30 minutes later that the boat entered a bay much larger than the one back at the village, and the air grew milky white and hazy, and the way they drifted along in an almost imperceptible breeze called to mind the stillness of a tomb. On seeing the orderly rows of bizarre mid-sized ships on the other side of the bay, Gurgon asked Meg, "Would those happen to be the nobility's boats?" "Yep. Seems they've been anchored there for more than 1,000 years." Since it wasn't the sheriff who'd posed the question, Meg's reply wasn't overly polite. "They're clean as a whistle. I heard they never rust, but the way they looked like they just got pulled up gives me the creeps." Meg wanted to say, "Good," and stick her tongue out at him. As the daughter of a hard-working fisherman, she viewed bounty hunters as right at the top of the list of people to be spit upon. But with all their science, the nobility would have been able to use aircraft to come and go to the island. The bounty hunter continued. "I'd heard stories about them using boats, and now it looks like they were right." The nobility had an intrinsic fear of water, running water in particular. In light of that, the fact that they'd built a facility out at sea on an isolated island and used ships to cross the waves to it was more than just strange. It bordered on the miraculous. Catching glimpses of enormous docks and cranes off in the distance, as well as fantastic machinery for purposes they could hardly imagine, the group reached land. The faint fog that hung there hid the true nature of this world from their eyes. When he saw what their final edition, Meg, was doing, the sheriff said with a stern expression, "You remember that promise you made, right? I won't have you going ashore. Take the boat back to the village. My folks and my little sister are here. Just let me be. I won't be any trouble. I'd hate to have to say this, but if something were to happen to the three of them, you'd be all that's left of your family. I can't let you do anything dangerous. You're going back. No way. I can't face the coming night worrying about if the three of them are safe or not. Take me with you, Sheriff." "Can't do it." "Then I'll go anyway. Isn't it safer for you if the boat's still here?" "Damn straight," Bo concurred. "What say we bring her along, Sheriff? Only no one's going to be looking out for her. If she dies, it'll be all on her own." "Yeah, in a desolate place like this, having a girl along will make us want to get it done a lot more than if it were just a bunch of guys." That remark came from Gurgon as he looked all around him. But the sheriff wasn't only looking out for Meg. "No dice," he said. "Meg, a promise is a promise. Head back to the village right away." "No way." "Then you leave me no choice. Wesley, bring Meg back, and then—" The sheriff's words were sucked into the air, vanishing. A buzz and tension shot through the group. The faint fog clinging to them had suddenly increased in density. "This is bad. Everyone stay close," the sheriff ordered. "Meg, hurry up and get in the boat." "No," the girl said, having already squatted down, drawn a female-sized harpoon from the case she'd been wearing diagonally across her back since she got out of the boat, and poised to hurl the weapon. "No sign of anything," Gurgon said. They could still make out the outlines of everyone. Bo replied, "I know. I'll try firing off an arrow." If anything weird's creeping up on us, that's sure to get a response. Not waiting for a reply, he raised the short bow that already had an arrow nocked. The bowstring twanged. However, his bow was aimed up at the sky. How was that supposed to deal with a threat that might lurk on the ground? The answer came as a red rain. At a height of about 30 feet, the arrow had split in 4 directions, and that had released the liquid sealed inside. There was a breeze, though it was faint. The crimson liquid was caught in the breeze, misting the group before moving on to the far end of the bay, and gusting into the expanse of trees that stood behind the buildings. It's blood. The spear-wielding bounty hunter cried after seeing what clung to his fingers. What the hell are you doing? Are you trying to bring every damn noble down on us? Wesley's roar got only a laugh in return from Bo. Sheesh. That way'd save us a lot of trouble after all. Them all come at once. He already had 3 arrows clutched between his fingers, and a fresh one knocked in the bow he had aimed at the ground, ready for offensive or defensive action. What the hell are you doing, asshole? Wesley continued to shout, but the sheriff's hand clamped down on the shoulder. Pipe down. The young deputy fell silent, realizing that he was the only one that had still been talking. His ears rang with an odd sound. At first he took it for the snarling of a small animal. No, that wasn't right. It was human. Human groans. Or humans groaning like animals. Gargon's lips twisted into a sneer. Pretty crazy, right? The forest is full of them. No one answered him. They were too focused on the voices issuing from the forest. Now groans rose from the entire forest, enveloping the landing party like a miasma. They're hungry, the spear-wielding bounty hunter remarked, licking his lips. There was something vulgar about his tone that made it seem like he might as well be talking about himself, but no one corrected him. What the? It wasn't clear who'd made that remark. Most likely it had come from someone who'd spotted something shooting up from the treetops in that milky white world. Much whiter than the fog, and they were threads so fine the more someone tried to focus on them, the more difficult they became to see. And hundreds if not thousands of them fell like a white rain. And it was the sheriff who shouted, "Run for it." The bounty hunters had scattered before he'd even given the word. Gargon and Bo dove into the water. In an unbelievable display of speed, the spear-wielder and rifleman dashed into a nearby building. It was Wesley who grabbed Meg, frozen in her tracks, and got her back into the little boat that had brought them there. No sooner had they pulled one of the thermal blankets on board over their heads than a white thread zipped right past them and a cry of surprise rang out. "Pa!" Wesley shouted, about to leap out from under the blanket. "Stay right where you are," he heard the sheriff cry. He was out in the white rain, or rather, wriggling in a net. White threads clung to his face, his shoulders, his hands and feet, and more stuck to him with every move he made until he was cased in a white cocoon. "Pa!" Wesley was about to dash over to the lawman but Meg clung to his waist for all she was worth. "Let me go." "No. You'll just end up like your father. You think that's what he wants?" Wesley became flustered. "But, Pa..." No sooner had the deputy put his strength into his arms to throw off the blanket than a weird sound traveled through the air. The net of threads wound about the sheriff's body had suddenly drawn tight. It was the sound of his bones breaking. As the two of them stared speechless, the white cocoon was squeezed down to half its former size before their very eyes, rose into the air like a fish on a line, and was yanked off into the stand of trees where the threads had originated. Meg could feel the young lawman trying to move in her arms, but she fought him desperately. The enemy was waiting for more prey to present itself. What's more, just look. Weren't there more white threads again, drifting lightly up from the stand of trees, sketching white lines against the blue of the heavens as they drifted back down? "We can't get out of here. We'll just end up getting wrapped up like the sheriff sooner or later." Fear froze Meg's heart solid. "At this rate, and we won't be able to move forward at all. We'll just be left here too." The instant the girl put her despair into words, the rain of threads grew chaotic. The arcs they should have followed became weaker in mid-flight, and they fell, drooping from leaves and branches. The master of those threads had met with some sudden emergency. Once the rain of threads had ended completely, the pair came out from under the blanket. Some threads clung to the blanket or the deck of the boat, so it took considerable time and effort to get through them. But on the other hand, picking a path across the open spaces on the now white ground seemed impossible. "As long as those threads stay sticky, we ain't going nowhere." Someone shouted over from the building where the bounty hunters, with the spear and the rifle, had taken cover. "No way of knowing how long that'll take. What's our play?" Wesley fell silent. Though whatever was discharging the threads had settled down, if they weren't careful how they moved, they'd still find themselves snared. If the master of the threads or some other monster were to then come along, that would be the end of them. "I've got a great way." The proposed solution had come from the water's surface. As the group watched, Garragon crawled out of the sea and touched the rock face. Mixing with the water that dripped from the man's body, the threads dropped off it. You follow? These damn threads lose their stickiness when they come in contact with water. So, what do you say to spreading some water on them? Better yet, it'd be a lot faster for the lot of you to dunk yourselves like we did." They all elected to do the latter, and Wesley was the first to jump in. On emerging dripping wet, he announced, "I'm going into the forest to see whether the sheriff is okay or not. The rest of you wait here." No one voiced any objection to that. With the sheriff gone, who'd bother going with the legs of a young deputy? In fact, the entire group seemed wholly inclined to follow his directive. They kept their silence, because Wesley was free to leap into the jaws of death for all they cared. "Sure. We'll just wait here patiently. Be sure to watch yourself out there now," Bo said to him with mock sincerity. "Wait," Meg called out, stopping the deputy. "It's dangerous to go it alone. One of you guys go with him." The girl's doleful tone drew no reaction. Meg quickly abandoned that tack. She'd heard more than enough about what sort of people bounty hunters were back in the village. She'd been wrong in the first place trying to appeal to those who had no compunctions about shooting or stabbing the backs of those they pursued. Criminals or not. Fine. Wesley, I'll go with you. That drew a cold but surprised grumbling from them. Meg turned around and said, "Just you remember this. Once we've rescued the sheriff, we're going to tell him all about how the rest of you left him for dead. When it comes time to get paid, don't come crying to us." The men exchanged glances. Meg's words couldn't be discounted as the screeching of a mere slip of a girl. This could have a direct impact on their livelihood. "Oh, that's hitting us where it hurts," said a voice Meg could have sworn she hadn't heard before. Of course, that couldn't be the case. She'd heard all the bounty hunters speak back at the village. However, this man was so taciturn, and his voice so low it hadn't stuck in her memory. "You folks can let your earnings get pared down if you like, but I'm going to." Meg and Wesley gazed at the speaker, once again puzzled that he hadn't made more of an impression. He wore a 10-gallon hat, also known in the western frontier as a cowboy hat. At an angle, but not much could be made out besides his aquiline nose. Given that the bandana wound about his neck was red as blood, it was surprising that he had escaped notice so long. The gunpowder rifle worn across his back on a leather strap looked quite old, and the thick tube mounted on top of it was something they hadn't seen before. The bullets in the gunbelt around his waist were for the high-caliber rifle, and he didn't carry a pistol. Only the leather-wrapped handle of a knife could be glimpsed in one of his boots. Like the others, he wore his saddlebags on his back. Ordinarily, saddlebags were draped across a sideboard horse's back, but by adjusting the straps, they could be turned into a knapsack. The rifleman didn't seem to mind the unpleasant looks from the remaining members of his profession, as he gave a toss of his chin in the direction of the forest and said, "We're going, right, Deputy? Call me Wesley. And you were—" Before the young lawman could root through his memories, the man replied, "Cowboy will do. Okay, let's go. As for you, Meg, I'm going. Don't you think I'd be in more danger staying here with this lot?" After catching a smirk from Cowboy, Meg glared at the forest. "Let's go." They started off with Wesley taking point. First part, and